The New Jersey Devils had a breakout season last year and are looking to take the next step and get to real Stanley Cup contention. Trey Matthews of Locked On New Jersey Devils joins us to talk about the team's prospects this year and the eventful offseason they had. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. You can also now find us on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. The New Jersey Devils are now considered elite contenders for Stanley Cup. Joining us, Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils. And Trey, it's been an eventful offseason for the Devils as they look to take that last step. What move do you think that they made was the most important this offseason?
You know, this offseason exceeded my expectations because going into it, I think the main priority for Tom Fitzgerald and company was to retain a lot of players, and they were able to do so. So obviously the two being Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt. Obviously you had to get Erik Haula involved because he was able to help out Jack Hughes in more ways than one. But I think the most surprising move that just came out of left field and no one saw coming was when he was able to trade away Yegor Sharangovich, who is a pending RFA, to the Calgary Flames in exchange for Tyler Toffoli. And Toffoli had a career year with the Flames just this past season. And now it's one of those instances in which the rich keep on getting richer and the top six for the Devils is absolutely stacked. And it's just been a big offseason for the Devils. And I think, once again, the most important move was getting Tyler Toffoli because you upgraded from Tomas Tatar to now Toffoli. And I think a move that kind of falls under the radar that I personally like, and I think this is sort of like Damon Severson's replacement, is Colin Miller. Now, the thing about Colin Miller is that as the playoffs progressed for the Dallas Stars, he was obviously a healthy scratch, which is why I think the Stars were so willing to part ways with him on such a low ball kind of offer, because the Devils gave up a 5th round draft pick, not in next year's draft, but in 2025. But the thing about Miller, he can rack up the hits, he can rack up the blocks. He skates really well. He has a really nice shot. He was up there in plus minus defensive point shares. So I really like that move for Tom Fitzgerald because I think the less you ask out of Miller, the better he's going to perform, because I think for the Stars, he was playing top defensive line minutes, but obviously who's in front of him? You got people like Jonas Siegenthaler, Dougie Hamilton, John Marino, Luke Hughes. They'll most likely, hypothetically, be paired alongside Kevin Ball on that third defensive line pairing, and I think that's going to suit him really well. So I think that was one of my favorite offseason moves. I've discussed it on my show heavily. So I think the Colin Miller move was underrated, but obviously the big one was Tyler Toffoli because it was so unexpected, but it fits like a glove. And once again, the top 6 unit for the Devils is stacked.
So, yes, the top 6 is stacked. How do you see the top 2 lines playing out to start the season?
So according to Daily Faceoff, here's how they're projecting it to be. They have Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, and Dawson Mercer on the top line. Then on the second line, they have Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes, and Tyler Toffoli. So I think the only adjustment I would personally make is you would switch Timo and Jesper. So I want Timo paired alongside Jack, and then Bratt could be paired alongside Hischier, because the thing about Meier is that he adds like a big body and he can sort of protect Jack Hughes in a sense. And we saw glimpses of it during the playoffs, which is if things get a little too hectic for Hughes, you can rely on Meier to be that big power forward near the net, because nobody's going to bully Meier in his big frame, or it's hard to do so. But he's able to just create shots for himself and others, and I think Hughes can really thrive on that. So I think that's how the top 6 unit will look for the most part for the Devils. Once again, the only adjustment I would make on the left wing side is that you would just switch Jesper to the top line with Nico, and you would flip Meier to the second line with Hughes, but you can't really go wrong either way. So I think another person that I haven't really talked about was Dawson Mercer, because he also had a big showing for the Devils last year after the month of January. He went on a huge point streak. He also in that same span went on a goal streak, and he's just an absolute Iron Man for the Devils, because in his first 2 seasons with the Devils, he has never missed a game, whether it's due to injury, being a healthy scratch, whatever the case might be. Mercer in his first 2 years with the Devils has suited up in all 82 games.
Some people are a little bit concerned about the blue line in New Jersey. How do you feel about it right now?
Honestly, I have high expectations for them, because it's something I've been talking about on my show. You sort of get an offensive-minded player and a defensive-minded player paired alongside one another. So for the top defensive unit, it's Dougie Hamilton, Jonas Siegenthaler. Dougie will obviously focus more on the offensive side of things. He was actually ranked as one of the top 20 defensemen in the entire league by NHL Network. Jonas Siegenthaler falls under the radar, but he is certainly a lockdown defenseman. And then in Game 5 against Carolina Hurricanes, the only, I would say, silver lining in that elimination loss by the Devils was that we saw John Marino and Luke Hughes go to work. Hughes only had minimal experience at the NHL level, but he was still able to put his skill set on full display, joining in on the rush and just being that offensive, dynamic sort of defenseman for the Devils. And you just see those glimpses a little bit. So, and John Marino, he was just playing shutdown defense as well. He was an absolute warrior. So once again, in that elimination loss to the Carolina Hurricanes, just seeing Marino and Hughes on full display, that was really exciting to see. And then I think people need to just understand that Kevin Ball, he is the real deal. And something I've talked about on my show is that if he appears in more games, I think we're definitely going to see Ball just have a big surge in terms of defensive production. He's not really going to light up the offensive side of things, but that's not his job. You can rely on someone like Colin Miller to do so. So in my opinion, I don't think the blue line should be of any concern for any fans. I think it's still really solid. Yes, you lost Ryan Graves. Yes, you lost Damon Severson. Those guys were crucial for the Devils, but they're replaceable. And the reality of it is that Luke Hughes outplayed Ryan Graves during the playoffs. And then for Damon Severson, in a weak free agent market, he was going to get paid. So Fitzgerald pulled off the second sign and trade in NHL history. And I think Severson's replacement, once again, is going to be Colin Miller. And you also have to factor in the possibility of Shimon Nemets making the opening night roster for the Devils. He had a good showing in Utica. I think he might be ready. There's no rush, but that's why you have some more depth added on the right-handed side in Colin Miller.
Any other prospects you think might be ready to step in and at least get a long look in training camp this year?
You know, I know he's not considered a prospect in the eyes of the NHL because he's appeared in a lot of games, but we need to look at Alexander Holtz. And the thing is like he's disappointed for the most part, but we're not ready to call him a bust quite yet, just because he's been thriving in Utica. He thrives on a national scale while representing Sweden. So that potential is still there. And I actually talked to someone who covers Utica Comets. His name is Ben Burnell. He writes for Daily Sentinel Sports. He says that the system for both Utica and New Jersey is quite similar, but the only difference is that the head coach for Utica, Kevin Dineen, he gives Alexander Holtz a much longer leash. And now Holtz is sort of the victim of the Devils' success, because he goes from being one of the guys that's going to be having the team built around him to now just being like, you got to be like a role player. And now the Devils are leaving that porch light on for him on the third line, most likely, which is why I don't think Tomas Tatar is returning. It's because they want to give some of their young guys a chance to try to thrive. So it's not just Alexander Holtz. It could also be like Nolan Foote, Seamus Casey. I know he still has one more year at the University of Michigan. He's been generating a lot of excitement. Lenny Haminaho, he was also a big surprise during development camp. He was the Devils' first selection in this past year's draft. So my thing is like the Devils still have a lot of good prospects in their pipeline, and this is a good problem to have because they are now considered contenders. I think just given the amount of young talent, you can either like use them to try to better utilize your roster, or you could try to groom them for the trade market. So it's really a win-win scenario for the Devils either way. But I think the, I guess, quote unquote, prospect that you want to keep your eye out for is obviously Alexander Holtz. And also, I'm excited to see what Luke Hughes can do in a full 82 game season for the Devils, because we saw snippets of it towards the end of the season and during the playoffs. He stepped up his game in more ways than one. And hopefully this is not a hot take. Hopefully I don't get a bunch of Chicago Blackhawks fans coming at me, but I am going to make an episode in the future making a case as to why maybe Luke Hughes can give Connor Bedard a run for his money.
For the Calder Trophy.
Yes.
All right. Trey, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find me on the X app, formerly Twitter, at TreyMatt4, and the show's Twitter page as well, at Locked On Devils. And you can find Locked On Devils wherever you get your podcast from. And it's also available on YouTube.
Trey, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thank you, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by AG1, a product I literally use every day. It's a daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I take AG1 before I leave my house for the day. It just gives me a better feeling of health and wellness and just makes me feel energized. And with AG1, you're getting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of these things. So, if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, try AG1. You'll get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network to check it out.